welcome back. Now, you probably don't know anything about this because it's not made it into the news cycle yet. In the UK, I don't know about in Europe, but it's staggering. Right, I'm actually on X right now, and I'm looking at House Judiciary GOP. Right, so this is the Republican Party in the House Judiciary for the American government, who have been asked to perform a search into the censorship of Europe of free speech. Now, we know that the Undersecretary has been asked to go back and get information and report to Trump about how bad free speech is in the UK. But looking at these files, I'm just going to read this to you. For more than a year, the committee has been warning that European censorship laws threaten US free speech online. Now we have the proof. Big tech is censoring American speech in the US, including true information, in order to comply with Europe's Digital Services Act. It goes on about all the way that they created codes and forums to pressure platforms to censor speech more and more aggressively, that the European regulators, all the communications going on with the big tech companies, the one they couldn't control, by the way, was X, right, when Elon Musk bought it. But it goes on and on. All the evidence has been published now. And so what were they censoring speech on? So I'm going down this thread here about the community guidelines that the European Commission set up. It says, to put simply, the boundaries of debate on political topics like mass migration, men in women's sports and more are now set by community guidelines which have to be in hoc to the demands of the EU Commission. As early as 2020, EU President Ursula von der Leyen told platforms to change their rules and take down content questioning established narratives about the COVID-19 pandemic and the vaccine. Now, is it any surprise then that the French offices of Elon Musk's X have been raided by the Paris prosecutor's cybercrime unit? It's the one platform the EU Commission couldn't control. Ralph Schoellhammer joins us now. I mean, there's dystopian and there's this. I think what is beginning to be published here, doesn't surprise me that it's not being put in wider circulation, but we are seeing the actual qualified empirical evidence that the European Commission has been saying to social media platforms, you must censor people talking out about trans stuff, about migration, about the vaccine, about COVID, and a host of other topics. I find that chilling.
Well, I mean, the good news is it's no longer a conspiracy because it's out in the open. So I think that's the positive side. Precisely what you just said. Nobody can accuse you and say, Alex, you're just, way too deep down into the rabbit hole of conspiracies. No, they're doing it out in the open. I saw there is this since August 2025, the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They have like their own Twitter account, it's always ironic that all these conversations, by the way, take place on the very platform they try to get rid of, which is their rapid response platform. And, they were kind of alluding to Elon Musk that what he's doing might fly on some island. Of course, I guess meaning the, pedo island by Jeffrey Epstein, which is, again, kind of funny because you can say many things about Elon Musk. He seems to quite cleverly excavated himself from the whole Epstein thing, and even what Epstein had to say about Trump. I mean, if you get called by Epstein one of the worst human beings, I would actually take that as a compliment.
No, exactly. But the thing, we're seeing this now, marrying, to me, the picture's becoming quite clear. Right, that we have a political elite across the Western world. It extends into Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and largely Western Europe, who all talk to each other on the phone, who all do things in step with one another. And currently they're in a massive panic about X. They all sort of turn around and say, oh, wow, Grok can be used to undress people, therefore we have to shut down X. And it becomes more and more clear. Why? Because it is the one social media platform they can't control. But when you look at the levels of control, when you go through these files of the House Judiciary and see quite how far and for quite how long the European Commission were trying to censor the peoples of not just Europe, but frankly, the whole Anglosphere and the Western world, because they all have to accord to these rules, I don't know what I'm supposed to make of this. I mean, the EU is basically operating like the old USSR.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a little bit more to X than just most people make it out about free speech, but it's the only social media platform, I would argue, on which you can actually create pressure on governments. And that's not least, like there are many issues on which I disagree with Elon Musk, but one thing has to be said quite openly, which is he is putting pressure on people he otherwise probably could not. And in a way, the way he does it, so there are so many things that I think Musk is criticized for, which are actually a good sign. So there is the Epstein way, right? You blackmail people. And as you see in the emails, or basically people, it's actually worse than this. You have people like Bill Gates who provide themselves the very material with which they then can be blackmailed. Just as a side note, allegedly what we saw from the emails, I do not know why somebody like Bill Gates needs Jeffrey Epstein to find a Russian prostitute. I would assume that this is something you can do without a middleman, but be this as it may. But what Elon Musk does, he doesn't blackmail politicians. He actually goes there and openly says on his platform for everybody to read, for everybody to listen, what he thinks should be done differently. Sometimes I agree, sometimes I disagree, but at least he puts it out in the open. And there can be no doubt that, for example, the issue of the grooming gangs or the rape gangs, what it actually was, or actually is, to be quite honest, would never have gotten the kind of attention it did without Elon Musk. I mean, this, as I said, agree with the man, disagree with the man, but at least he's saying the kind of things he wants to see changed, or the things he wants to keep out in the open. He doesn't do the backroom dealing that everybody else is doing, particularly the European Union. I mean, there is now evidence that despite the, which is of course not an American company, despite TikTok telling the European Commission that the claim that the Romanian presidential elections of last year, the first round, led to a victory of Georgescu was because of Russian influence and Russian buying of ads on TikTok, that this was not the case, that this was untrue. But they went out with that claim anyways. So pretty much the European Commission didn't do it directly, but it is fair to say that under EU influence in Romania, an honest, fair election was cancelled, and that's just another way of rigging an election. That is, as you said, that is very, very worrisome.
This is exactly it. It's like when Elon Musk bought X, we all kind of realised after a while that we've been living in a tunnel now that we're suddenly in the light. It's like, oh my goodness, all of these lies, all of this stuff being suppressed. We found out that, for one moment it was Hunter Biden's laptop, then it was the Barrington Declaration during COVID. Anyone who was standing up against what was supposed to be the settled science over how we should approach all of this. And you kind of think to yourself, blimey, the EU Comets Bureau, because that's, I think, the best and most suitable name for the commission, the unelected apparatchiks who seem to be dictating everything across Europe, have been controlling us, censoring us, gaslighting us, manipulating information, lying to us for ages. Ages. We're only just beginning to learn of the extent of it, and we're actually now watching them in real time, floundering around, grappling to try and control the situation, exposing their megalomania even further by going in and raiding offices. It's just astonishing. I think this is huge.
No, I think it's true. And I think it's also important to say also for the viewers and listeners, I mean, I think we use the term elite to describe those who are currently unfortunately in charge, but that does not mean that they're elitist in a positive sense in any way, shape or form. Many of them, to be quite honest, are morons. I mean, what's the name of the House of Lords, the guy Peter Mandelpants or Mandel without pants or whatever his name is? I mean, or the same with Bill Clinton's painting in a dress. I mean, what is it? I'm sure that you and I have been to some, fancy cocktail party, whatever, but I never felt the desire to drop my pants and have a picture taken of it. This is it's so absurd. It is. Although my theory is, and this also because we always ask the question on your show, Alex, why are they doing what they do? So one argument is maybe it is all a huge foreign intelligence conspiracy and foreign intelligence operation. Maybe. Sometimes I wish it is, because that means there must be some intelligent people somewhere who pull the strings. So in a certain way that would give me relief. But the second thing, which I'm more and more suspicious that is the true thing, they are all deeply, deeply unserious and very bored people. And they just, they nailed their flag to the mast of multiculturalism and mass migration and, diversity is our strength and all these slogans. And now that they see that they're not working, instead of admitting that they were wrong, they double down on it. I mean, there's probably a little bit of both of these theories.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think there's plenty of muppets and morons. Yeah. My time in the European Parliament exposed that to me personally. Yeah. But I actually do think that there is, there are certain individuals within the upper echelons of the European elite who have probably been there forever, and they pick exactly who they're going to give the big jobs to. I remember we were supposed to have that Spitzenkandidaten process where the head of the president of the European Commission would be chosen as the leader of the biggest group that gets elected in the European Parliament. That way it democratizes it a bit. And did that happen? No, didn't happen because they didn't want that guy. Can't remember his name now. He was all right, actually, that German geezer. Anyway, they didn't want him because he wouldn't do their bidding. And I was in the Parliament at the time when this whole fight was taking place because we were supposed to have the Spitzenkandidaten, and they all started kicking off because Ursula von der Leyen was just in the corridors of power, suddenly appointed. And everyone's like, what? She was a really rubbish defence minister in Germany. Why have they picked her? Then you find out she's got all these weird WhatsApp messages and her husband's involved in pharmaceuticals, and there were some strange things that took place during COVID, and we've never been able to find out what was in those WhatsApp messages. She's, people have begged her and tried to nag her to release them and disclose them publicly, but she refuses to do so. And so I do start to think that at the very top, particularly of the European Commission, which to this day remains unelected and yet proposes all the legislation, amends all the legislation, comes up with all the things that basically used to govern Europe. And it's important to tell the audience that there is greater difference between the states in America in terms of legislation as compared to federal America than there is between the EU member states. This is how powerful the unelected European Commission are. And without doubt, I think there's very senior people in there who have got a plan, know what they're doing, pick their people at the very top quite deliberately, and then have a load of sort of moronic acolytes doing the bidding. And this censorship thing is just the tip of the iceberg.
No, I think that's true, but I believe that you're absolutely right. There are plenty of people who know what they're doing, but I think they could not really give you a concrete answer as to why they are doing it. And this is always the big question, right? The old agreement that I think many people like you and I, I'm sure many of viewers as well, believe in or try to believe in, is this idea that the main obligation of the government in whatever form is to serve to the well-being and to the benefit of its people. But that's no longer how they see themselves. And as I said, this is not just a European problem. I don't think that Ed Miliband and his NGO millionaire brother David Miliband, that they really care deeply about the British people. I'm sorry, I don't mean to slander the man, but I don't think he does. I think the same is true about Keir Starmer, and for whatever reason, it appears only to be Ukrainian male models who that they constantly firebomb Keir Starmer's cars. So what's going on there? Why is nobody asking that question?
I know. Why is no one asking it? Because I wanted to ask that question, and I'm like, I don't know if I could ask that question.
What happened to Fleet Street? I mean, if there's one thing you could rely usually in the British media was that if there is a sex scandal, that the British journalists would sniff it out. And they have an acting prime minister who is apparently in the crosshair of every male Ukrainian model on the planet. And nobody asked the question why. I'm just curious. I mean, I don't know if he contracted allegedly an STD like Bill Gates did with his Russian prostitutes. I don't know what's going on.
Ralph, you want to get me arrested, don't you?
No, I'm very tired of all of this. There's a lot going on. It's happening on a daily basis. Yeah. And nobody, particularly the media, notable exceptions like yourself, are asking the questions that should be asked. I'm not saying that I'd be satisfied with the answers, but could somebody somewhere at least ask the question?
Right. No, I agree with you entirely on all aspects. I find that increasingly journalists seem to just regurgitate wires that are put out by mysterious people in offices, or, sort of do a lovey-dovey interview of someone from a particular political party that they support. And there aren't many traditional proper hacks out there with a real news nose who want to go after and dig out the truth. By gum, don't we need it? Ralph, I promise next time you're in the UK and we go out for dinner, we'll see if we can get your pants down. Right, OK, I mean that joking, by the way. Calm down.